The mill actually was opened as a cotton mill. It was during the canal era, and one of the canal contractors, a man named Jonathan Baines, thought he could grow cotton through here and tried it. Didn't work. And so by the early 1850s, they converted it over to a grain mill. Now, a grain mill basically means it was a grist mill that would grind for human consumption pretty much, and sometimes they would grind for animals. But you got to remember, at that stage, you didn't grind a lot of feed for animals like that. Later on, it became a feed mill plus a grain mill or a grist mill. The original mill that we had, it began in 1845, and it had a fire and another fire and another fire. There was a disastrous fire back in 1932 that basically took the top floor off. This mill has been extensively renovated many times. The last major renovation is 1973. We're in the mill that's owned and operated by the Department of Natural Resources, the Division of Museums and Historic Sites. We bring in grain from a place near Shelbyville that has a food grade quantity corn, and we grind it by pushing it through the top hopper into the center of the stones. It crushes the corn in between the two stones. The top stone turns, bottom stone doesn't move at all. And as it crushes the corn in between, then you have the grist. And then it simply filters out to the outside, and then we elevate it up through our system of elevators. And then we do what we call a bolting or a dressing. It's basically a sifting action. And we define it as cornmeal and corn grits pretty much. Now back in the old days, they had a different kind of system like that, because you pretty much didn't sift grain back then. Now when I say the old days, I'm talking in the 1840s and 50s especially, so even later on. But what you did do is you pretty much ground the corn, and then you just had it, that's what you had, then you either sifted it or you just ate it like it was. It's ground fairly fine, but it's not anything like we have today's process, you know, flours and things like that. In fact, that was one way you would actually get the miller paid, because if you brought in, let's say, a bushel of grain to grind, the miller would take a miller's toll, and he would take out basically a cup, or it wasn't really I don't want to say cup, but it was a measure, and that's what he would keep, and then he could sell that, and that's how he basically was paid. Water power has been around, you know, basically since man's figured out how to float on it. And it'll be around as long as man's around, basically. It's very simple technology in a lot of ways that you can learn to grind bread. I mean, grind grain for breads, or you can learn to move a shaft to turn something, whatever. It's a good engineering way of doing things. It does give folks an opportunity to see the techniques of grist milling and how, you know, what you would do to grind grain like that. You know, it is a very simple operation in a lot of ways, and but it's kind of unique to see, because you just don't go everywhere and see it today. We're pretty much used to opening up our a little canister and popping out the flour and making our bread, and even that today is becoming archaic. How many people actually make their own bread? You know, you go to the store and buy it and do that kind of stuff. This was a way of life back in the 1840s, 50s, and beyond. The mill was a very important part of day in, day out life, because weekly you had to come to the mill if you wanted to have bread or cornbread. I mean, that was just something you had to. And then later on, the mill was just as important, because this is where you had to grind your grain if you were having animals that needed to be fed by grain. So, you know, it was part of American life as it kept going through. Now, it's important for us to remember that as part of our heritage, more so than like that. And today, it's like we're a pretty good example of, you know, hey, this is what it was like, and here's what they did. So that's why we like everybody to come by and see it.